A woman gives birth in a department store in Philadelphia in 1961. The doctor shows very soon after and checks on the unstoppable crier infant. He is shocked to learn that the unborn child has broken both arms and legs. Many years later, following a job interview in New York, David rides the train back to Philadelphia. He removes his ring and stuffs it in his pocket as soon as he notices a woman is going to sit next to him. He shares that he dislikes football and that he is terrified of the ocean during their conversation about sports. He makes an attempt to flirt with her as well, but she ignores him and moves to a different seat. David then dons the ring once more. Everything trembles around David as the train abruptly picks up speed. Joseph, David's son, is watching TV at home when the news announces that a train had crashed, killing everyone on board. David panics when he looks over the notes and realizes his father was on that train. A little while later, David awakens at the hospital and sees someone being operated on close by. A doctor finds him and inquires about his medical history. David says he's never had any allergies or underlying medical issues, and he was shocked to find he was the only one who survived the collision. The fact that David is pain-free and hasn't even sustained a scratch astounds the physician. David finds his family waiting for him when he exits the room. When Joseph tries to get David and his mother Audrey to touch hands, they instantly break it off. David informs Audrey later at home that even though he doesn't think he got the job, he will be moving out shortly. It appears that they are sleeping in separate rooms and are not together. David goes to the memorial service for the 177 people who died in the disaster the following day. When it's finished, David goes back to his car and discovers a card with the limited edition emblem inside of an envelope. When he opens it, all he discovers is a message asking him how many days in his life he has been unwell. No names are included. After that, David leaves for his job as a football team security guard. He asks the secretary to find out how many sick days he has accrued, all the while keeping the card on his mind. Then, with a nostalgic look in his eyes, he watches the team train. David's supervisor tells him at the end of the day that he's getting a raise because he hasn't taken a sick day since starting this work 5 years ago. David asks Audrey that evening if she remembers him ever being ill because he doesn't. After giving it some thought, Audrey acknowledges that she cannot recall ever seeing David ill since they first met in college. A flashback takes place in 1974 when the previous infant has grown into a teenager. It turns out that he has osteogenesis, which makes all of his bones incredibly brittle and prone to fracturing. The youngster fears returning outside and suffering injury once more, in addition to being called Mr. Glass by other students. His mother tells him she left a gift for him outdoors to get him out of his seclusion. After gathering all of his strength, the child receives the gift, a comic book, coincidentally. He'll receive another one every day he leaves the house, his mother explained. The young man has developed into an adult in the present. Elijah is his name, and he runs a comic book art-focused art gallery. When he learns that a customer wants to give his 4-year-old a priceless painting, he cancels the sale since he is strongly in defense of comics as an art form. David and Joseph visit Elijah in the afternoon with questions regarding the card. Elijah says he's concerned about David's well-being and is relieved to learn he's never been ill, but he has had an injury of his own. During college, he was involved in a vehicle accident that left him with a broken leg, forcing him to give up football. Then Elijah clarifies that he has spent his entire life studying comic books and believes that superheroes have their roots in ancient history. He's often wondered if there is someone else who is the complete opposite of him, someone who is unbreakable because of his health issues. He believed Elijah might be the one after learning that he was the only survivor of the train catastrophe. Joseph is thrilled that his father might be a superhero, but David walks out with his kid, believing this to be some kind of strange hoax. After reading about the accident in the newspaper that evening, David gets the idea to raid his closet. There's a revolver concealed there, along with a folder with newspaper clippings about his life. The first two depict his football career's beginning, while the final one shows the vehicle accident. The fact that he lived is remarkable because the car was seriously damaged. Audrey interrupts him at that point and inquires as to whether he has been with anybody else. When David responds that he hasn't, Audrey explains that the train accident has left her frightened and that she would like to work on their relationship once more because his survival suggests that there may be more opportunities in life. Elijah tells David when he sees him at work that it's no accident that he selected security as his career because his gut tells him to keep people safe. David pauses as they approach the line to give one individual his whole attention because he believes he will depart before being patted down. As he expected, the man quickly leaves. Elijah questions David's knowledge of the man's weaponry, to which David responds that he simply had an image of him in his mind. In actuality, he has a built-in ability to recognize bad behavior in others. Elijah refers to it as his superpower, but David urges him to leave since he doesn't like the direction the conversation is taking. Elijah inquires as to whether anyone else was involved in the vehicle collision before David answers that Audrey was. Elijah then heads to his car and notices the man who appears to be armed walking past. He even asks the man to wait as he begins to follow him, but the man ignores him. Elijah makes an effort to go as quickly as he can given his circumstances, but he is still too slow. Elijah pushes his body too far and falls, shattering several bones as he does so, while the man descends the subway station. He watches as the man's shirt moves to reveal the gun hidden underneath, just as David had predicted. As his cane breaks and he struggles to cope with the excruciating pain, David returns home after the game and witnesses Joseph playing football. Reminding him that Audrey detests the sport due to the injuries it produces, he chastises him for it. David then makes the decision to begin a small experiment by lifting weights. It's only 250 at initially, the most he's ever lifted. With every attempt, Joseph increases the amount until they are utilizing all of their available weight. Inquiring further, they also include several paint cans, and David manages to raise 350 without exerting much effort. Elijah is informed in the hospital that although he has several fractures, the 14 in his leg are the worst, and he will require physical therapy to treat them. Later, he and Audrey go to physical therapy, and he takes advantage of the opportunity to inquire about her marriage while feigning to merely want to get to know his doctor better. He finds out that they got together because she couldn't stomach football and the harm it does, and that David's automobile accident forced him to give up the game. Audrey becomes worried when Elijah unintentionally mentions David's name, while continuing to ask more questions. After Elijah presents his theory, Audrey is unsure of what to believe. David makes the decision to stand in the middle of the crowd during a different match, and whenever someone runs into him, he sees visions. He initially merely hears a child yelling, but then he notices a man ominously taking something out of the trash. Feeling suspicious, David asks the man to leave the line and check him, but he doesn't discover anything in his pockets. David concludes that he was mistaken to think he was powerful. David is called to the school at that same moment because Joseph got injured. After explaining that Joseph got into a fight, the teacher asks David whether he remembers her from his time as a student there. She relates the tale of how little David slipped into the pool and spent 5 minutes on the bottom. He was dead when they dragged him out, but the paramedics brought him back to life. Because of him, they ultimately modified the pool's behavior guidelines, and the children now tell this incident as an urban legend. David becomes even more certain that he is not a superhero after hearing this. Joseph says he got into a fight because he stood up for a girl who was being bullied because of her race after they leave the school, adding that he aspires to be a hero like his father. Joseph doesn't buy David's claims that he's normal, despite his best efforts. Audrey informs David in the evening that Elijah told her everything. Before they can talk about it, they find out that Joseph has taken David's revolver and is pointing it at him in an attempt to show that he is uninjured. After a few moments of hesitation, David is able to persuade the child to put it down. When David goes to see Elijah the following day, he instantly confirms that the man from the stadium was armed. Elijah also believes that David cooked up a fiction to quit football in order to convince Audrey to date him, and that David was not injured in the automobile accident. David informs Elijah that he almost drowned as a child, and it should be enough reason to put an end to their relationship. He also says that he doesn't want Elijah to bother him or his family anymore. Later, Elijah is in a non-responsive state at the comic book store. Elijah continues to move the wheelchair to cause the cashier to make mistakes while he is being dragged outside in order to close the store. When he locates the comic he needs, Elijah finally speaks after several attempts. In the meantime, in order to go on a date, David and Audrey leave Joseph with a babysitter. As they try to get back together over drinks, David is forced to acknowledge that he has distanced himself from his family because he doesn't feel right. Upon their return, the babysitter informs them that she received a call from New York stating that David has been hired. She is reassured by the family, nevertheless, that they will remain. Elijah has left a note on the machine stating that water is David's kryptonite and that all heroes have a weakness. David sneaks out in the middle of the night to locate the train from the accident because he is desperate for answers. Upon observing the wrecked car, he concludes that no ordinary person could have survived it. This brings up the recollection of the car crash, and it becomes clear that Audrey was trapped inside the flaming car while he managed to escape unharmed. David saved Audrey by ripping the automobile door off with his amazing power. David realized that something was strange about him not being wounded when someone soon came to aid. Overwhelmed by the recollection, David phones Elijah and confesses that he has never been hurt before, asking for advice. He is instructed to go where people are by Elijah. Shortly after, David enters a busy location and extends his arms to begin investigating people's intentional offenses. He witnesses a man abusing a drunken girl who is unconscious, a lady diverting a cashier so she can steal jewelry, and a man hurling a bottle at a gathering of black people. He finds out the janitor killed a man in order to gain control of his house when he runs into him. After he finishes his shift, David follows the janitor to the house and observes that he comes in the rear door. David enters by the same method and finds the place to be messy, in addition to the owner's body still being on the stairs. After that, he searches the rooms and discovers 2 children bound in a closet. David releases them right away and requests that they keep quiet. David then goes to the main room and discovers that the mother is also restrained. David walks through the open balcony door, believing the man may have made his getaway. David is pushed off the balcony at that precise moment and lands on a damp area by the janitor who suddenly arrives behind him. As David looks around, he sees that he is standing on a pool cover that is gradually going under his weight. David is stuck in the cloth, unable to breathe and fighting for his life. Luckily, a stick emerges out of nowhere in the water, and he grabs it to get help. As it happens, the children have gone to his aid. After that, David goes back to the main area and chokes the janitor by grabbing him from behind. David is pushed into the wall by the man in retaliation, which breaks the surface. David eventually kills the man because he is still stronger. The mother is then set free, but sadly, she has already passed away. That evening, Audrey's sense of unease finally vanishes when David brings her from her room so they can share the same bed. Joseph notices his parents are acting incredibly affectionately with one another the following morning. David shows Joseph the newspaper with the story of the deceased janitor, which features an image of an enigmatic vigilante, while Audrey seems preoccupied. After he verifies it's him, David urges Joseph to keep the information private. David sees his mother when he later attends Elijah's art exhibition. She informs him about the 2 categories of villains: those who battle with their fists and those who battle with their brains. Because Elijah refers to David as a buddy, the woman is aware of him. After that, David goes with Elijah to his office, where Elijah greets him and wishes him luck on his first night as a vigilante. When they shake hands, he offers to shake David's hand, and that's when David learns something startling. Elijah has been purposefully causing accidents for years in an attempt to locate a superhero, including the train David was on. Startled, David scans his surroundings and discovers Elijah's plans and study. According to Elijah, David has finally come to terms with who he is, the antagonist to David's hero. They are complete opposites, yet occasionally they become friends, just as in the legends. Maybe Elijah's villain pseudonym has always been Mr. Glass. Elijah is taken to a facility for the criminally insane as soon as David phones the police.